Hey, if you're like me, you've heard a ton about global warming and global climate change, but you may not necessarily know what global warming is or what it really means. Let me try to break down parts of it for you. The Earth's atmosphere is comprised of many different types of gases, like oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and others. These gases have been in our atmosphere forever, but since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when humans started burning fossil fuels and emitting so much pollution, a change in the balance of gases in the air began to occur. And when these levels started changing, something called the greenhouse effect intensified. Now, the greenhouse effect isn't necessarily a bad thing by itself. It allows Earth to stay warm enough for life to survive. It works like this. When the sun's rays hit the atmosphere and the surface of the Earth, approximately 70% of the energy stays on the planet. The other 30% is reflected into space by clouds and other reflective things. But even the 70% that gets through doesn't stay on Earth forever. Eventually, it gets radiated out. Some of this heat makes it into space, but the rest of it ends up getting absorbed when it hits things in the atmosphere, like carbon dioxide, methane gas, and water vapor. But a major problem in recent years is that more heat is staying on the planet and can't get through the increased level of gases. Now, this doesn't sound like such a bad thing until you realize that even small changes in the planet's temperature can cause really bad things to happen. For example, ice melting in our polar regions. If the ice melts, some coastal regions, like parts of Florida or New York City, could potentially be swallowed up by the oceans, displacing hundreds of millions of people. Ha! Scary stuff. But luckily for all of us, we have researchers all over the world monitoring the Earth's atmosphere to try to figure out what's going on with it. Now, one of those scientists is Dr. James Hansen of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies. A key objective for Dr. Hansen and his crew is the prediction of atmospheric and climate change in the 21st century. Now, I went to meet Dr. Hansen near his office here in New York City. Dr. Hansen's office is located just above the famous Tom's Diner from the Seinfeld show, but I spoke with him on the campus of Columbia University.
Well, the big issue that has come up in the last several decades is the fact that humans have now become a big player in the Earth's long-term climate. You know, scientists had thought that the Earth is so large that it's very hard for humans to impact the natural system, but it has become very clear that humans are now having an effect. And primarily that's through the added gases that we've put into the atmosphere, especially by burning fossil fuels. That's oil, coal, and gas. And that releases carbon dioxide and other gases and small particles, and these affect the energy balance of the Earth. The gases trap infrared heat radiation so that it tends to make the planet warmer. The planet has to warm up enough to keep the amount of energy going out from the planet equal to that coming in. And the result has been a warming of about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 100 years. And we can see that there's more warming in the pipeline. You know, 1.5 degrees doesn't sound like much compared to weather fluctuations, which are 10 degrees or even more. That's fairly small, but it's enough to begin to have some long-term effects.
So what is NASA's role in your research?
Well, it's natural that the home planet is a place that NASA has been looking at from space for a long time. For example, there's just a remarkable satellite that was launched a few years ago called GRACE. It's the gravity satellite. It measures the gravity field of the Earth with such a high precision that we can see the change in the mass of the Greenland ice sheet or the Antarctic ice sheet and other things. Well, what we see is that sea level is now going up at about 3.5 centimeters per decade, which is, you know, in a century would be about so much. That's more than a nuisance, but the danger is that it could get to be much larger than that. If we keep adding more and more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, the rate of melt will increase to the point that the ice sheet begins to collapse. And if that happens, sea level could go up several meters, which would be a worldwide disaster. Therefore, we need to figure out how these ice sheets work, and we need to figure out how much warming they can stand before they begin to collapse. That's the kind of thing which we can study with the kind of measurements that NASA is making.
Can we stop this process, or
can we stop global warming?
Can we at least slow it down?
We can do it. We could even stop it, not just slow it down, but it's not easy. Right now, the planet is out of energy balance with space because of these added greenhouse gases. So if we wanted this planet to stop warming up, if we wanted the Arctic ice to stop melting anymore, then we would have to restore this energy balance. Now, we could do that. So if we would decide, okay, let's really make a strong effort to reduce this air pollution, the things that damage human health, we could actually restore energy balance on the planet and stop the warming. But, it's not going to happen unless people begin to ask for it to happen.
All right, so what are some of the things that NASA is going to be doing to help with the prevention of global warming?
Well, I think the most important thing is to continue and expand global observations. Okay. For example, although we have good measurements of greenhouse gases, we don't have good measurements of the small particles in the atmosphere. The sulfates and black soot, small particles that are produced mostly in fossil fuel burning also, but they reflect sunlight or absorb sunlight, and that affects the climate just as well as greenhouse gases do. And we're working on instruments that can do a better job of that. But we also need to continue measurements such as the gravity satellite measurements of the ice sheets, because it's very critical to understand how much warming they can stand before they begin to collapse. So we have to keep our eye on the planet Earth and really see what's happening.
Cool. So Dr. Hansen has explained how NASA is helping us recognize what's going on to our Earth. But what can we do to help? Well, we can do small things like use energy-efficient appliances and light bulbs. And we can recycle and seal any areas in our homes, like doors and windows, that allow heat to escape. You can unplug so-called vampire electronics, like cell phone chargers, that suck electricity even when they're not being used. And there are tons of things that we can do every day. We just have to start being smart about it. Other than power plants and industries that put so much pollution in the air, there is one other major source of pollution out there: the car. Cars pump millions of tons of pollution in the air every day, but we got to get around, right? So what are we going to do about it? Well, in big cities like here in Manhattan, you can take public transportation, like the subway. Or you can take buses, hybrid cabs. Yo, taxi! You can even bike or walk. But that's not the only thing we can do. How about developing a car that runs completely on alternative fuel, or just electricity? And no, I don't mean one of these little weenie golf cart type cars. I'm talking about a full-fledged sports car that can change the way the world drives today.